Each week, we welcome to our NfG stage one of our highly talented members or special guests with something designed to help you and your business. With an impressive drive, our next guest quickly found her calling in life. And I'm not referring to a passion for exploring in camper vans. With the HR department often perceived as one of those departments that is most feared to encounter, she decided to bring the human back into human resources, one of the most varied departments imaginable. In an article I saw recently, HR was defined as the unofficial psychologist, event organizer, peacemaker, lawyer, and even teacher, which doesn't even begin to demonstrate the many capabilities of our wonderful guest. She was soon flying high in more ways than one, either from behind the desk or at several thousand feet in the cockpit of a Cessna 152 aeroplane, enjoying breaks from work by enjoying breaks in the cloud as a pilot. I'm sure it won't be long before she's aiming for the Kármán line. With nearly 2.5 decades in HR, there are few things she hasn't seen, and so many changes. Always keen to make connections, she's not only a well-respected contributor to Networking for Good, but is also a BNI president, parish councillor, executive coach, and much more, demonstrating just some of her amazing talents above and beyond her HR expertise. With a talk about the F word, asking how we can improve the feedback experience for everyone, we bring to you Pippa Dennitts. Good morning, Pippa.
Good morning, Richard. I'm sure I don't deserve that, but thank you very much indeed. So, the F word then. It's a word, it begins with F, ends in CK, and is guaranteed to make everyone uncomfortable. Feedback. We all need it, we often want it, we rarely appreciate it. Now, here's one definition. The original definition of feedback: the screeching and humming sound resulting from the return of a fraction of the output signal from an amplifier, microphone, or other device to the input of the same device. And that's often how we see feedback in a development context: unpleasant, annoying, and ultimately only a fraction of the picture that we're putting out there to the world. So with that being the origination of feedback, it's hardly surprising that we're not generally that keen. Now, my aim today is to share some thoughts, some background, which will hopefully build understanding, and also to give you some actual useful tools you can apply to make the feedback experience more productive. Now, of course, feedback isn't just about when you're an employee. These are tools that you're going to be able to apply with your clients, with your contacts, even with your kids and your family. So a lot of the information which is shared around feedback is focused on how to give it. But for me, there's 3 areas we can all focus on that will help the experience. After all, it does take 2 to tango. So these 3 areas are generating feedback, of course, giving feedback, and then receiving feedback as well. So we're going to look at each in turn. First up, generating feedback. In response to that age-old problem, I never get any useful feedback. Have you ever asked a client, an employee, or a manager for feedback? Have you got any feedback for me? If you ask a general question, you'll get a general answer. It's great, or you're doing fine. And ultimately, it's nice if you want to be told that that's great, but what use is that to you? So you come out of the conversation thinking, well, I'm not sure I really gained anything there. The other person comes out of the conversation going, phew, I got away with that one. So be clear about what you want. Always ask for feedback from people that you trust to want to help you, people who have your positive intent at heart. So first useful tool of the day then. Let's make it easy for your target to give you useful information you can act on with some simple rules and a structure. So the structure first. Could you help me with one thing I could do or stop doing? That's the opener for this. So you're asking for help. Notice I've not used the F word at all. So could you help me with something I could do or stop doing that could enable me to be better at, whatever it is? So the theory here and the psychology behind this is that you're asking for something specific. You're not just saying, generally, can you give me some feedback? And the other person is left thinking, well, you know, there was this situation, that situation, and all these other things. Where do I start? You're asking for one thing. So for me, it might be, could you help me with one thing I could do or stop doing that could enable me to be a better parish councillor? And I could ask that of my fellow parish councillors or of the people in my parish. So it's a nice, easy tool to remember. So the structure here is to be specific, that one thing I could do or stop doing, to focus on behaviours rather than anything else. So I'm asking for something specifically that is within my power, that I control, that I could change if I wanted to. Another part of this is to be persistent, which is if you don't get a result first time, keep asking. Generally, the more you ask, the more people understand that you're serious about wanting to know how you can improve. And then, of course, follow up afterwards. So that's the first part on generating feedback. Let's move on now to giving feedback. And here's the thing, we worry about upsetting people, or we think they must surely see what we see, so why haven't they changed already? Obviously, they don't care. Now, if you need to give feedback when it hasn't been requested, firstly, consider your own intent. Feedback should never be a third-hand experience. So think about when you're delivering a feedback message to somebody, do you have their best interest at heart? Do you want to give them some information that might help them grow, or do you just want to prove you know more than they do? Think about your intent. From a third-person point of view, if, for example, Dave in accounts wants you to let Maria in marketing know that she's got a stinking attitude when it comes to meetings, that's not a conversation for you to have. But if you notice that Maria in marketing has certain responses to Dave in meetings, you can help her out with that. So here's the tool that we think about for giving feedback. So the first thing to remember is that we're giving an opinion. It's not necessarily an out-and-out fact, it's what we feel, what we think in our minds. So it's important that we own that opinion if we're to build trust. So to start this with, can I share some of my thoughts with you? So I'm owning that offer. And the second part of this is that by asking, can I share some of my thoughts with you, I'm asking for permission. And something funny goes on in people's brains when you ask for permission. They're given a choice. They can say yes or they can say no. If they say yes, certain parts of their brain actually open up to take in the information that you're giving them. So that point about asking for permission is really important and really helpful to help them take on board the information. So the next part of this is to give a positive. Now, I'm not talking about the colloquial, if you excuse my language, crap sandwich, where you say something nice, then you say something that needs some work, and then you say something nice afterwards. That's proven not to work because you've got two nice things balanced against one thing that really you want them to be focused on. So the other person doesn't hear that balanced view. But if you start with something positive, it reinforces to the other person that you've got their best interests at heart. Some people call it what went well and even better if. So following on from I really liked whatever it was, you can then go in with your specific and behaviour-based feedback. The same as we'd like to generate specific and behaviour-based feedback, that's what you need to be giving as well. So when you did such and such, I noticed this happened. I'm concerned that might prevent you from. So thinking about Dave in accounts and Maria in marketing, Maria, I really like the way you engaged with the whole accounts team in that meeting, but when you were listening to Dave, I noticed that you started to cross your arms and raise your eyebrows. I'm concerned that might prevent you from engaging effectively with Dave. So there's your example there. And the final part of this useful tool is to reinforce that you want to support people, to support the other person, but not to take away the responsibility. So you could finish it with, once you've thought about how you want to address that, let me know how I can support you. So you're not actually offering help, you're leaving the responsibility for the change entirely with the other person, and you're allowing them to go away and think about it, and if they need you, to come back and ask for some support on it. So that's useful tool number 2. Think about your intent in the first instance. Ask permission, get them to open up the synapses in their brain so that they can take on board the information that you're giving them. Lead with a positive, be specific and get those behaviour-based descriptions in there and offer that support. So finally, receiving feedback. Now, we're rarely taught how to receive feedback well, and as a result, we find it upsetting, confusing, distracting. It doesn't need to be like that. We have in this mind, well, what do they know anyway? So having some rules around how to respond to feedback can be really helpful. If you've got a team of people who all apply the same rules for generating, giving, and receiving feedback, you're far more likely to build a highly productive and high trust team. So this tool is really quite simple. When you're given feedback, there are only 2 allowed responses. Now, bearing in mind that feedback can be positive or negative, the first response you're allowed to give when you're given feedback is thank you. And this does a couple of things. If you're given positive feedback, it moves you away from that inclination to say, oh, well, it wasn't me, or somebody else could have done better, or it was a team effort, all of those things, and allows you to actually take on the feedback in an open and positive way, which then allows the other person to recognize the value of the feedback they've given you. Of course, if it's not so positive, just saying thank you moves you out of that position of trying to defend what you did. Oh, I wouldn't normally do that, or such and such was at fault on that one. So and if you do that, if you move into that defensive position, it makes it really difficult for that person to come back and give you feedback again. So your second response on this one is, can you help me understand that? So if you genuinely don't see what it is they're trying to tell you, ask them, can you help me understand that? And just dig a little bit deeper into what they're saying. And then you say thank you. Now, of course, if you want the Premier League, World Cup, or Olympic medal of being a feedback receiver, you could go with "and what else?" But ultimately, let's just focus on the thank you and can you help me understand that? So the rules around this are not to defend your position if you're receiving less than positive feedback, to think about the giver's intent. Do you trust them? Was the feedback specific and clear? Ultimately, feedback is only somebody's opinion at the end of the day. And then think about your immediate emotional response. Because if somebody gives you some feedback and you go, ouch, oh, well, that hurt, just take a second to recognize where that's coming from in you. Has it perhaps touched a nerve that actually you recognize what they're talking about and maybe you just don't want to accept that yet? Just think about how that immediate reaction comes across with you. So there we go. Those are my 3 useful tools for generating, giving, and receiving feedback. Are there